It's a way of looking at the world. It's a sort of canopy for thinking about Black diasporic artistic production. It's even an epistemology that is really about sort of thinking about the future, thinking about the sort of subject position of Black people, and about how that is both alienating and about alienation, right? And so that the alien becomes to figure quite centrally in Afrofuturism, the outsider figure. It's also about aspirations for modernity and about having a place in modernity. It's about speculation and utopia and about, I think, part of why it's Afrofuturism in particular is that, part of the resilience of Black culture and of Black life is about imagining the impossible, imagining a better place, a different world. Afrofuturism was coined by Mark Derry, and his introduction to some interviews that he did with Samuel Delaney and Tricia Rose and Greg Tate. And, this was in 1994, and the word really captured what we'd always known about Black culture, but it gave us something to call it, to name it, right? So, it allowed us to name the sort of theatrics of George Clinton, right? It allowed us to think about Sun Ra and about the sort of spatial, sort of astral cosmology of Sun Ra. It allowed us to think about LaBelle even, right? A sort of, gendered, feminist, sort of science fictional, effective performance that was about space, but also about, strong gender roles, strong women's roles. It gave us a way to sort of think about Delaney and Octavia Butler, and it also was these things that seem strange, like these sort of outliers, right? So if you think about Delaney and the sort of larger opus of African American literature or even gay literature, right? Because he's an important figure in both. When you think about all of these figures in an aggregate as being people who are sort of expressing or tapping into something that we call Afrofuturism, then it makes sense in a different way, right? So all these people that are outliers, Janelle Monáe, right, Prince, people who are outliers because of their prowess in their field, because of their sort of, out-of-the-box imagination, makes sense in a sort of tradition, right? And I think that's what sort of thinking it through Black culture with Afrofuturism allows us to do. It gives us a tradition and a legacy where all the pieces sort of fit together. I think, Janelle Monáe, I mean, there was a very interesting interview, I think it was in Time Out New York, where she effectively says, I'm an Afrofuturist, right? So it's become a sort of moniker or banner or characterization that people take upon themselves. And she's just absolutely fascinating. I mean, I think she's definitely in the lineage of LaBelle. I mean, that her video Metropolis, of course, and the song Metropolis, of course, I think, or maybe it was the EP, definitely sort of explicitly harks back to Afrofuturism, right? It also obviously is an allusion to the Metropolis film, but this sort of sense of this allowing another space, particularly another space for gender possibilities, right, for her. And so she is, Janelle Monáe is absolutely fascinating. She's utterly individual, and I think there's something about taking the speculative move to Afrofuturism and the lineage of LaBelle and the lineage of George Clinton, and even in the lineage of Prince in some ways, right, that allows her to sort of make that move. It was Patti LaBelle and Nona Hendrix and another woman whose name I'm forgetting, unfortunately. But, they came out similar to George Clinton with these outlandish outfits that were like these sort of spacesuits and moon boots and these sorts of things. And, the sort of space of Afrofuturism as a space of possibility and speculation allows for different types of, their famous song is a song that's sang in French, and it's about a woman's sort of sexual power. It just allows for people to sort of be outside of, I think, normative traditions in all sorts of ways, right? So it was camp, it was futuristic, it was strong women, all together on stage, right? And it was very, they're also interesting because they were obviously in the tradition of these sort of Motown women's groups, the Supremes, of course, but the Supremes were these very sort of normative, pretty in some ways women, and LaBelle were beautiful but also fabulous, right? So taking it to another place. I was a part of an arts collective called Apogee that was African American sort of writers and curators and the like, and we all had our individual projects. And certainly inspired by Mark Derry's writing. Also, I was a graduate student at NYU at the time, and Trisha Rose was my teacher. And you know, the other work I do is about sort of African American experience at the conjunction of science and technology. So that's generally my field of inquiry more generally. It's become a way to place traditions that didn't quite fit in things like the Harlem Renaissance or the Black Arts movement, right? It gave us a way to really think about all of this fantastic work that really propels future other work, right? Because it's the work that is speculative, is pushing boundaries, is outre, and it's given us a way to think about it as a lineage of work and a tradition of work. And so I think that it's absolutely relevant.
Monet and left foot.